All right, so for this segment of my podcast, I'm actually also recording it with video. So if you're listening to my podcast, the Bass Guitar Worship Blender podcast, know that I'm also recording this as a video, so you can also watch it on my video channel. So if you're not familiar with my video channel, that's the Worship Blender, which is on YouTube. And if you're watching this on the video channel, you're not familiar with my podcast, you can go basically anywhere where you listen to a podcast. You can just do a search for the Bass Guitar Worship Blender podcast, and you'll find the podcast. So kind of cross-promoting this particular segment here. And the reason for that is because I think that it applies for both of my audiences, for both my podcast and also for my video channel. And the reason why it applies is because it's really for any musicians that play on a worship team. It has to do with memorization. And so basically, how many people out there have also, in addition to playing on a worship team, have also played on a secular team, or a band or whatever that plays secular music, or any kind of secular music at all? I know for me, I didn't get saved until approximately 10 years ago, so I spent most of my life as a musician playing secular music in one way or the other, whether it was as a kid learning classical music on piano and having to memorize songs, or if it was playing in bands and playing out at clubs and bars, because if you're playing secular music and that's basically, that's where the gigs are, you have to go out and you have to play bars and gigs. And from being still in high school in the late 80s, I was already playing in bars and gigs at that time. So I've spent a lot of time doing secular music in those environments. And in those environments, like say, for example, at a club or a bar, you're usually playing 4 sets of 10 songs. And so that's 40 songs. And if you're playing, say, a Friday night and a Saturday night at the club or the bar, there's going to be an expectation of you to not play the exact same songs both nights. So you're probably going to maybe repeat 20 of those songs the second night, but then have 20 new fresh songs to add in. So doing the math there, you're doing at least 40 songs if you're playing one night, or if you're playing 2 nights, you're probably playing roughly around 60 songs. And now playing on a worship team, I play 4 songs. 4 songs on a Sunday, and that's it. And so back in the day, we were memorizing up to 60 songs for a weekend. And this was back, like I said, in the late 80s, in the 90s, very early 2000s. We didn't have the internet then. We didn't have iPads. We didn't have chord charts or anything like that. You were just, as a band, we were expected to learn our parts separately, come together, rehearse, make sure we had all the songs down. Then we went out and we got the gigs. And so there was no spoon feeding of what we should play. It was just we had to go figure it out on our own and show up, have the songs memorized, and be able to play them. And so now on a worship team, 4 songs, it's like, wow, this is easy. I only got to learn 4 songs, and then they're going to repeat over and over throughout the year, in the rotation of the songs. So for me, I typically very rarely never play with an iPad with chord charts during service. Now I'll have an iPad on stage. I'll use it basically just as a song list. Okay, what's the next song? Oh yeah, okay, that's the next song. What's the next song? Okay, yeah, that's the next song. Let's go to that. Or occasionally, maybe there might be a song that's new, and I'm like, that one section I can't quite remember. Let me just kind of pull that up before we start to make sure I got that part. Yeah, okay, that's good. But basically, I'm memorizing everything. And I want this video to kind of encourage people to memorize songs as well, because when you're got your head buried in an iPad, it's kind of hard to really be connected with the music. Again, I'm not saying you can't use it, because like I said, there's times when I do, and I'm actually going to contradict myself here too, because actually I play at 2 churches now. I play on one on my home church on Sundays, and then every other Wednesday I play at a completely different church, and that church has a different different songs that they play, and even the songs that are the same, they play them completely differently. They do all kinds of weird stuff with arrangements and stuff, so I've got a lot of notes on my chord charts, and I usually probably don't even know what songs we're playing until the Wednesday before service. I'll be at work and I'll get an email, oh, here's the songs for tonight. I'm glad we finally got those. Okay, great. And so I'll be at work though, so I can't practice them. So the first time I actually get to run through the songs will be during sound check right before service. So yes, I've got iPad on stage going through all the chord charts for those songs in that particular situation. So it's okay to use chord charts. I'm not condemning anyone if you are. I'm just saying in general, you should be trying to memorize the songs. And of course, it's going to vary from the culture of the church too. Like for example, on the Wednesday church too, I don't get the songs to the last minute, but also at the same time, there's not an expectation from a presentation standpoint of having to have the songs memorized with the band, because we're basically off to the side of the stage. The singers are the only ones that are up front with lights on them. We're kind of almost, I don't want to say we're like a pit orchestra or anything like that, because we're still visible up on stage, but we're really way off to the side. Also, we've got our piano player actually is playing a real acoustic grand piano with the lid up, and I'm basically sitting behind it next to the drummer. So really most of the congregation can't even see me because I'm behind the piano with the lid up, sitting down. And so from a presentation standpoint, it's really not important for me to have to play without the chord chart, from a presentation standpoint. Where a lot of churches, there is going to be an expectation, hey, no chord charts, you got to really be making eye contact with the congregation and presenting as part of what you're doing with worship. And so I do realize that every church is going to be a little bit differently. A lot of churches, though, are very lenient on, okay, whatever you need, every week you can have your iPad up, but they're the same songs every week for the most part, and they're the same 4 chords in most of these. So, contemporary worship is pretty easy stuff. Come on. And it's the same 4 chords, just in different keys and in different orders, but it's still the same 4 chords. So basically, secular musicians are kicking our butts. Come on, they're memorizing 60 songs for a weekend, and we're struggling to do 4. So let's not let that happen. We should be leading the world, not the world leading us. We shouldn't have to have our secular musician friends that we're inviting to church and hoping that they'll see Jesus, through what we're doing, and they show up and they're like, why is the band struggling with getting through these 4 songs? They're all looking at their iPads. If they're focusing on that, then they're not hearing the message of the songs. And it's like, oh, come on, So let's lead the world. Let's not let the world lead us. For us as bass players, and I say bass players even though this is also being broadcast on my video channel, but really even my video channel skews mostly towards bass players, and the podcast is for worship bass players. So I'm saying from a standpoint of a bass player, I think we can really lead the way here and be able to be the ones that memorize our songs first, because honestly, our parts are usually the easiest, and then kind of lead as an example here and not use iPads, at least not all the time on the platform, so that you can kind of encourage other band members to start doing the same thing. Because again, church is a little different than secular music. You're not there to put on a show, I realize that. But when people are in the congregation, they just see everybody staring, playing instruments or whatever, and they're just staring at what's the next note on my chord chart on my iPad, and it's like, it's the same 4 chords through the whole song. Why do you have to look at your chord chart at all? You just go, okay, these are the 4 songs. It's repeating over and over. There's not much to it. So we should really be, I just want this video and podcast episode to really encourage people to really focus on memorization. Having said all that, this Sunday, I'll be playing with a chord chart, because this Sunday is actually Christmas Eve. I'm recording this on December 21st. And so Christmas, everybody knows, we get chord charts at the last minute of Christmas songs that we're going to do, and there's a billion different versions of every Christmas song that's out there, and usually the chord chart that we have that the worship leader wants us to do won't match any of the recordings of that particular version of the song that we have. So it's like, okay, we got to make sure, the way I might want to play this particular song completely differs from how this chord chart is written. So just to keep me in check, I'll have my iPad up for this Sunday as we do those Christmas carols. Also, my role is kind of changing a little bit at the church. I'm becoming much more of a music director at my home church, in addition to being a bass player. So now I've kind of been that role for a while, but it's becoming more serious about it and more of an expectation from me to give a lot more cues during service. Because if any of you have played with backing tracks, you'll know that you get the little lady that speaks to you that says, verse 1, verse 2, chorus, and she's always like the recorded version of her. She's always talking to you when you're playing to that click track of what's the next thing you need to play. And so we don't play that much with tracks, but we played enough with tracks that our band goes, we really like that. So we're not playing with tracks. There's now becoming an expectation from me to give all of those cues all throughout the song. And for me, since I'm not always looking at, I memorize the songs and there you go. So I might say, okay, let's go to the bridge and, do the bridge again, or things like that. And they might say, well, which bridge? Bridge 1A or 1B? And I'm like, what do you mean? And then I'll have to look at the chord chart and go, okay, they've split out what I call the bridge into two different sections. And it's still the same exact chords, but there's just different lyric lines. And so they're dividing it on the chord chart that way. And so I just need to have notes to make sure I know that what I'm saying matches their particular chord chart. Like if I say verse 2, I'm thinking, hey, the verse that's after the first chorus. Well, maybe the first verse on the song plays twice as long before it gets to the first chorus. So they have verse 1 and verse 2 as what I would call just verse 1. Verse 1 is just longer. So things like that, I have to make sure that my naming conventions match up with the chord chart that the musicians are looking at. So now I'm starting to kind of make more of those notes and just having a cheat sheet for all of the songs just all on one page of making sure I know what those differences are and the naming conventions and how I do things and stuff like that. So I'm starting to use a chord chart, or I should say an iPad more now for my Sunday service when I didn't before, just to make sure I'm saying the right things from a music director perspective. But I'm hoping over time that I can start weeding that out as well. So again, I'm not saying you can't use chord charts, or shame on you if you're using chord charts. Absolutely not. Use them when you need them. All I'm saying is that make sure you're trying to memorize them and start moving more towards memorization more often than you're actually having to use chord charts. And I think you'll find that playing is a lot more fun because you're not stuck in a chord chart. And also there's a confidence that you have when you have a song memorized. There's a confidence there. Like if I was playing, like a perfect example, classical, people say, well, what about classical music? Symphony orchestras, they all have they all have sheet music in front of them and stuff like that. Yes, absolutely. That's true, but that's a different expectation there, just like different churches have different expectations, different cultures and things like that. But typically the lead instrument, if somebody's soloing, then that person very rarely is going to be looking off of a chord chart. Or if you've got, like I mentioned, learning classical music as I was growing up, I would have to memorize songs because a pianist getting up on stage, typically there's an expectation of having those songs memorized. And I can tell you that when I would learn a classical music piece and have it memorized, the difference between how well I play it when it's memorized versus when I'm sight reading it off the sheet music is night and day. You really can't play something that complex without it being memorized and having muscle memory involved. And so when that's what memorization really leads to, is that muscle memory where it's just your hands are just automatically playing it. You're not thinking about it, and you're just flowing with the music. And so there's just such a huge advantage there. Don't be wanting to be spoon-fed by your worship leader. Oh, what's my chord chart this week? Just focus on memorizing the song, listening to the song, and finding out if there's particular things in that song that the chord chart's not telling you, because chord charts are just, it's basically an outline of the song. It's not all of the parts. So you really aren't going to get everything you need out of just looking at a chord chart. Compare that against the recording the song, play through it, and see what differs from the chord chart, because sometimes chord charts are wrong, and I've made videos on that and how and why that's the case, and how chords that are written there are completely wrong, or the chord chart might be implying a melody line or something like that, but not actually implying the chords that you're playing, different things like that. So I would encourage you to watch those videos if you have a chance. But compare the chord chart against the music, and just really focus on learning, memorizing the song. I probably am beating that horse to death now, so I think I've probably made my point good enough. I can end this episode. If I think of anything else, I'll tag it on at the end of the video / recording. All right, so thanks for watching, and thanks for listening.